So we're going to be talking about the Prepare 1099s report today. The Prepare 1099s report is in the Payee Entity Review. And if you don't have it, you just need to click Add Report here. And so then it will show up as an option here, and you can add it back. But yeah, your Prepare 1099s report, if you click this open, this report is designed to help you stay on top of your client's vendor list every month, and especially in the next 3 months, so that you know what, how much each vendor, how much you've spent with each vendor, what documentation you have on them, what information you may need from them or need from your clients to go get from them. So it's designed to be essentially your workstation for your 1099s filing or 1099s process. Okay, so what does that look like? First and foremost, just like any other Keeper task, you can add checklists here. So if you have a specific process or procedure you want your team to follow, you can add that in here as well. And then down to the actual meat of the report, you'll see what this vendor list is showing. So it's showing any vendors who meet the 1099 threshold. So that's over $600 in IRS eligible spend, where that spend is excluded or excluding any sort of credit card spend. So that means if you have a credit card account and that's used either to pay a bill, so bill payment, or that's used to just like incur an expense, those transactions will get excluded. And then it's also taking into account any accounts you have excluded from your account exclude list. So if you have certain non-reportable spend types, so job supplies and lumber, for example, are non-reportable, you can add them to the exclude list here. And then any transactions that are tied to those accounts will be excluded. One other point is if you have, let's say, a bill that has job supplies on it and contract labor on it, it will go in and exclude just the line item. So you'll only get the contract labor line item included in the spend, whereas the job supplies will be excluded if it's in your excluded list. Important thing to note, all of these settings are modifiable. So you can turn back on credit card spend. You can show all vendors below the spend threshold if you want to see that as well. And then if we actually toggle just down here, down to the actual report, we can see all of our vendors sorted into descending order of spend. And you can see all of the relevant information that you do or don't have on that vendor inside QuickBooks. This report works the exact same way for Xero. So you can still edit emails, addresses, add tax IDs. The one difference here that is actually not super noticeable, but is a minor implementation detail, is where it says 1099 needed. In QuickBooks, that corresponds to the track payments for 1099 checkbox. In Xero, that corresponds to the contact group track or 1099 trackable, I think is what it's called. But it's sort of system generated 1099 trackable. So what happens if you mark this as yes, is that will go in and check the checkbox in QuickBooks, or if you're in Xero, that will also go in and add the contact to that contact group. Just to show you all what that looks like here, I am going to be toggling back and forth a little bit between QuickBooks and Keeper, just so that y'all can see what changes are happening under the hood. So here we can see that this track payments for 1099 checkbox is now checked because we checked it here. One important thing to note is you'll notice this has 3 options, whereas QuickBooks only has 2, checked or unchecked. The reason we added this third option called unknown is because what we found, and certainly what I found when I was reviewing my own books and still do, is you'd look at a vendor and you'd see that the box wasn't checked. And there's no way of knowing whether that box is unchecked because they're a C Corp or that box is unchecked because they just haven't been reviewed. So basically, we have this unknown state, and unknown and no both map to this box being unchecked. So now if I refresh the page here again in QuickBooks, now that I've moved that to an unknown state in Keeper, we can see the box is now unchecked. If I mark this as no, it will keep that box unchecked, but it will also move this vendor out of our review list here. So we can see we've got all of these vendors are for review. That means the 1099 needed checkbox is checked yes or unknown. Basically, it's sort of doing dual work. It's both showing you all of the vendors that may need more documentation. And then if you mark something as no, it will sweep them into this 1099 not needed box. So if we move Barley, Bramwurst, and Bullwinkle, I don't know why I chose a demo vendor that is just like such a mouthful to say, but I did. So if we move this to no, we'll see that moves it here into your 1099 not needed list, basically, so you know you don't need to worry about them. One other pro tip we recommend, especially if you're sort of working with a team or you want to have like some recollection of this later, is you can add a comment. So you can say like, this is a C Corp, or in Rippling's example, maybe this is actually payroll. Doubly doesn't need to be reported, but so any sort of information that you want tied to that vendor, you can add as a comment here, and then it will always be tied to that vendor whenever you go and pull them up. And of course, we mark this as no. Again, now if we look at this in QuickBooks, we'll see that that checkbox is still unchecked. Okay, let's move it back to unknown and come back here to our for review. And all right, so what we've got here is we've got the vendor's name, we've got their total year-to-date spend, we've got their email address, but we're missing their address, we're missing their tax ID, and we don't have any information on whether or not they need a 1099. The reason why we might have those things is we've paid a bill and we've sent it to them via, I don't know, check or ACH or what have you. But we didn't get their W-9 first, or the client paid them and the client didn't get their W-9 first. So at this point, you have two options. You can ask the client to go ask the vendor, or you can ask the vendor directly. If we click ask the client here, basically what this will do is this will add a new non-transaction question into the client portal where the clients can go to give you feedback. So you can say, please upload a W-9. We have these template questions here, for example, and I'll mention if you would prefer to take this burden off of your client's plate, but you don't even have their email address. So like this City Hall, not a great example, but like if you don't even have their email, so you don't even know how to get in touch with this contact or with this vendor, you can also ask the client for an email address. And then once you get the email address, then you can go and request it from the vendor. So here, if we go and add this to the client portal, and now we preview the portal, we'll see they have a new non-transaction question to please upload a W-9 for Barley, Bramwurst, and Bullwinkle. Once they upload a file, you'll see the file attachment both here as well as in your non-transaction questions. I'm going to actually go ahead and delete this now and then talk a little bit about vendor requests. So vendor requests is the logical extension of this report that lets you actually ask for the thing that you may be missing. So here, we need to get a W-9 from Barley, Bramwurst, and Bullwinkle. All we need to do that is click this Ask Vendor option. Here, we can specify the sort of information. This will autofill with, please give us your W-9. And then we can choose to email the vendor. And then we can also choose to CC the client. So if we CC the client, the reason we have this feature there, sometimes it helps build a little bit of like extra legitimacy with the vendor. The vendor may not know who you are, like where this is coming from, what the deal is. But if you have the client on CC'd, the vendor can respond to the email if they want, and the clients will be able to sort of put them at ease. And then also sometimes just having the client on CC'd helps with the response rates of these. So you can choose to CC the client as well. With the email vendor, you can also choose how this is built out. So you can give us your W-9 request. You can edit anything here as well. We have a pre-built template by default, but you can change it however you prefer. All right. So we're going to just go ahead and add the request. And one thing I'll mention, if you don't check that, you can also just grab the W-9. So for example, let's say you wanted to text this to someone. You can just, once you ask the question, you uncheck the box. You can also click copy vendor request link. And then if we open that in incognito, or you can open in a regular window as well. But if we open that, you can see this is just like, this is the full vendor request link that the vendor can use to fill out their W-9. Okay, a couple options here. So they have either the ability to drag and drop a file. And if they're on mobile, by the way, if they click this, this will open up their camera so they can take a picture of their W-9. And so they can either drag and drop a file, or they can click here to fill out a new W-9. This W-9, if they click here to fill out a new W-9, this gives them the ability to essentially walk through a form filling experience. And then choose all of their options. And then at the end, I'll actually go through and fill this out so that we have this full comprehensive understanding here. So let's say we're an LLC taxed as a C Corp. This is BB and B LLC. Okay. And then one of the other things we added here is you can now finally collect electronic delivery consent here in the vendor requests as well. All right, so that's all they have to do. They fill it out. They get some nice little confetti that makes them want to fill out new W-9s requests in the future. And then on your end, if we rerun this report here, we need to actually refresh the page to see that show up as answered. But here our client sees, or we'll see here, we now have that W-9. We actually go ahead and refresh the page. All right, so now we can see this has been responded to. And if we click here as well, so we see the W-9 on the left, and we see the vendor information over here on the right. One really nice feature that you can take advantage of if they fill out the form fill experience is you can click autofill, and then that will update all of this information with the information that's available here as well. We can also mark the W-9 as now on file. We can say they are taxed as a C Corp. Yeah, LLC taxed as C Corp. So we don't need the 1099. And then basically we save this here, and that will save all this information back to QuickBooks. We can also upload this vendor W-9 as an attachment back to QuickBooks as well. And then lastly, we're going to mark this as 1099 not needed equals no. And that will also, as you see, move BB&B over to the 1099 not needed filter. So you can also see here now all of this information has been synced and updated on these columns here. And then also if we go back to QuickBooks, we'll see we've got their email address, we've got their new vendor name here, we've got their address, we've got that attachment here as well. We'll click this open. And so this, by the way, this is what you'll see. So this is a full PDF. You can download it, you can print it. So all they had to do was fill out that form. That form also looks great on mobile, and you get your full W-9 just the way you'd expect it. We also have their EIN here. So you can see that. This box is no because the 1099 was not needed since they were a C Corp. And yeah, so everything you need is right here available in QuickBooks and also available here in Keeper. All right, a couple other things I'll mention, just sort of minor details. So if you have a W-9, you can upload that here as well, same basic process. Also, you can edit any of this information here as well. So if you wanted to edit this back to a different vendor name, you could do that. You can change their email address, their tax or their address, their tax ID. All of that information is modifiable and of course syncs back to QuickBooks. A couple other interesting things I'll mention. You can also click into this toggle right here as well and see all of your included and all of your total vendor transactions. So here, for example, we can see any individual transactions. We can see what their totals were. If for some reason we had a particular transaction that we wanted to exclude from our reportable total, we could also exclude that here as well. And you can also see any other vendor transactions that may not have been excluded based on their exclusion list criteria. All right, so that is most of everything we've got here on the Prepared 1099s report. I am going to share two more quick things about requesting this information from vendors directly. And so that is, if we come back here to the top, we've got our vendor requests. So the last thing I want to talk about is static vendor request links. Static vendor request links are a way to give your clients a single link that they can send to any vendor to get their W-9. So the best practice for document collection and W-9 collection with regard to accounts payable is you only send the payment after you get the W-9. I know this is something that's really hard for a lot of bookkeepers who either aren't doing the payables or are doing the payables but are beholden to the way the client wants to do business. But with static vendor request links, you can just copy this link, send it to your clients, or even put it in your client's resources here. You can say, here's your vendor request link. If you ever lose it, it's like right back here, just go and get it. And then that vendor request link is basically an open portal where any vendor, they can send it to any vendor, and that vendor can upload their W-9, and then you'll get a notification, and they'll get a notification. The client will get a notification as well, and that will be the sort of trigger to pay. And the really nice thing about this is basically it lets you put some of that onus of document requests on the client to help make this process a lot smoother, a lot easier. So we actually, I'm not sure if people here are in the audience, but some folks here, we've actually are actually our vendors as well. And we've sent them these vendor requests, and it's a super easy, super straightforward process to get that new W-9. One last thing I want to share about the vendor requests portal is you can also actually advertise your own firm services. So here in the bottom left-hand corner, we've got this little link. You can customize what this link goes to and customize what it says and customize if it shows up at all. So your standard full flexibility that you get within every feature in Keeper. And basically, this is a way so that if you send a vendor request, you're already doing that work, and this just lets you get a little bit of advertising out there, sort of like putting your name on the back of your truck if you're a plumber, just like one more way of getting more mileage, getting your name out there. And this actually we've seen is really, really helpful with some firms. They'll send vendor requests, and 1 out of every 20, 30, 40 requests will turn into a new customer. So this is, you're already doing your work, and it lets you advertise your firm services at no added cost. Just to be fully comprehensive here on this training, I'll show where you can customize that. So it's in your practice settings, you go to client portal, and you go to vendor requests. So here you can choose if you want to show it at all, what link it points to. This won't actually point to keeper.app. By default, this will point to your portal's URL. So if you have like clients.mypracticename, it'll point by default to mypracticename.com. So it'll just go to basically your homepage. But you can customize this with a 1099s or W-9 specific landing page or a Calendly link or whatever you feel like would be the best bet. And then you can, of course, customize this text here as well. All right. And with that, that's going to go ahead and just about wrap our 1099s training. So I'm going to go ahead and pause now, and I will turn things back over to the Q&A and see if I can answer any questions about that. All right. Looking at, doesn't look like there are any questions on 1099, so hopefully that means I did a good job explaining things. So with that, I'll go ahead and answer maybe a couple more questions here, and then we will wrap things up with the webinar. Okay, I have client-specific tasks marked as done, but they still hang out. Do I have to have a date to get these tasks to fall off? I assume by this, Judy, you mean client-specific tasks are non-closing tasks. So if you have a non-closing task and you mark it as complete, it should get moved to your completed section. If you are not seeing that and it is a non-closing task, go ahead and write into the chat. So chat bottom right here as well, and they will be able to take a look at your specific file and get you a response, or if it's a bug, we can get that fixed as well. If it is not a non-closing task, so if it's in your sort of closing tasks, they actually all stick around here indefinitely, so you can see all of the work that you've done for this particular close. And then when you start a new close, they will basically copy over, so you'll get a new set of tasks for each month that you run the close. Oh, actually, there were some 1099 requests. I did not see those at the bottom, so I'm going to turn back to those. Okay. Teresa asked, how can you tell if they've agreed to receive their 1099 electronically? Great question. So if you have a vendor request, basically, if they have that box checked, you'll be able to see if they give e-filing consent. And so we walk through what that looks like. If you upload the, if you sort of fill out the form, there's that e-signing checkbox at the bottom. Also on your static vendor request links. Sorry, actually, this works for static vendor request links or anything else. If they submit this here, they'll be able to add their email here as well, and then also consent to electronic delivery of 1099s. So that's sort of baked into the vendor request functionality as well. Okay, if the W9 states the type of entity, can Keeper give the user the option to check off the entity type to help determine if a 1099 is not needed? Keeper gives the user the option. I'm not sure I'm understanding this. Is this essentially like if it's an LLC taxed as a like taxed as an individual, that would autofill to 1099 not needed equals no? If so, that would make sense. Not something we have, definitely something we could add. Okay, Lisa asked, can we get a recording of the 1099 of just the 1099 workflow to send to our team? The answer is yes. In fact, this whole recording will be available. We'll have both the broader webinar available, as well as the more narrower just how 1099s work, just how vendor requests work, split out as a separate YouTube video so that you can send to your team for training. Okay, Cindy asked, regarding the link that you give to your clients to collect vendor W9s, so the static vendor request links, that link is different for each client, right? But the vendor would see my logo and not the client's name. Is that correct? That is correct. So this link is unique just to that client, but it will show up with your branding because it is your domain. We could add an option to add the client's logo here as well if you feel like that would make things more personal. No reason not to do that other than no one's asked for it before. But yeah, so this link is unique per each client. Lisa asked, the vendor request link, is it in the portal? And when they upload the W9, does it appear in files? So the answer to both of those questions is sort of no and or it depends. So by default, the vendor request link is not in the portal, although you can very easily add it to your resources right here. So you just click your vendor requests here, copy your link, and then go to your portal settings and then add it. In this case, I've already added it. And once you add it to your resources, then that will show up in your client's portal in their resources. This is the, there's that. And then when the clients upload it, at first, it will just show up in your client, when the vendors upload a file, it will at first just show up in your vendor requests. And then at that point, you can mark it as resolved. If you attach it to a vendor, it will show up in your vendor files, but not by default into your file system, but you can always move files around as you want. Okay, Carolyn asked for a 1099 question, will there be an option to add exclusions for Venmo expenses? That's a great question. And fun fact, Venmo actually makes this even more complex because if you pay an individual over Venmo, they don't send a 1099K, but if you pay a business over Venmo, they do send a 1099K. So I'm not exactly sure how we sort of ultimately as bookkeepers trace back to that, but we are working on some functionality over the next couple of months before the deadline to filter out basically by check number. So you'll be able to put in like Venmo as a check number and auto exclude those as well. Okay, Dana asked about debit card payments from a regular bank account. So that is something that will also be sort of better handled in a exclusion based on check number system. Robin asked, is the vendor request link for both standard and white label users? You do need to be on Keeper Premium with a white labeled portal URL set up in order to take advantage of vendor requests. Okay, Betsy asked, does the Prepare 1099s report keep track of what is eligible for a 1099 and what isn't? For example, Jane Doe paid $100 for software and $600 for consulting. Will it 1099 her for $700, or does Keeper only know to 1099 for consulting? This is an interesting broader question. I'm not 100% positive. I thought software was, in fact, generally eligible for 1099s, but you could imagine this question being asked about like specific products and labor that may be more clear. But anyways, the way that you can sort of determine what transactions or what line items get included or excluded in the Prepared 1099s report is by managing your excluded list. So if you add an account to the excluded list, that should not be included in your 1099 reportable spend. That will filter all of the spend related to that transaction from your sort of year-to-date reportable totals here. Okay, someone asked here, can you use the W9 feature for clients who are not on QBO or Xero? At the moment, no. At the moment, it does need to be on a connected QuickBooks or Xero client. Okay, someone asked, is there any way you can personally find out if a vendor is a corporation without asking the client? Theoretically, I guess you could do a state-by-state search if you somehow know like where they're incorporated, but not what entity type they are. There's no way you can do that in Keeper, to my knowledge. I mean, you can ask them a vendor request and not CC the client. But I think maybe a broader information question than just like functionality of Keeper. Ray asked, does the 1099 on file information carry over from year to year? The answer is yes. So if you mark this as yes, this will stay unchecked or stay checked or unchecked accordingly. And then 2022 filed, 2023 filed, that will roll over. So in the new year, it'll say 2023 filed, and then that will be unchecked. All right. Well, I think we are going to go ahead and draw it to a close. I have some other Q&A questions that we were not able to get to. So we'll see if we can download these and export them so we can get y'all back questions as well. But you're also welcome to pop into our chat and ask us a question if you need a response. And we will be happy to get you on your way accordingly. So with that, I am going to wish everyone a happy Halloween. Thank you all so much for taking the time. In case you had to dip out or you weren't on this recording at all, we will be distributing a recording of this on YouTube, and we'll send out the link in our update on Thursday so that everyone has access to it and so that you can share it with your team if anyone wasn't able to make this call. But yeah, thank you all folks so much for taking the time. It was a pleasure as always, and I look forward to seeing some of you at QuickBooks Connect in a couple of weeks and more of y'all on this webinar, same time, same date next month.